I would love to have met Elizabeth Montagu, who became the Duchess of Buccleuch and became the outstanding patron of all the arts.
She'd been brought up with music. Her grandfather patronised Handel and commissioned the Royal Fireworks music from Handel. So she was surrounded with music right from her earliest childhood. She probably heard Mozart on his visit to London in 1766, I think it was. And she had lessons. She was obviously passionate. It was in her blood. She adored music. And so she, when she came to Scotland, wanted to pursue this passion and had all the means to do it, and was able to engage the best musicians. And for them, of course, it was a wonderful opportunity because being a musician is pretty precarious. She, with her extensive patronage, was able to guarantee incomes for really a lot of people. And by association with her, their reputation would be enhanced, of course, so they would get work elsewhere. So she really held musical court here at Dalkeith. Elizabeth had been on an extended grand tour in the 1780s, just before the French Revolution.
She managed to get there.
She worked her way down, all the way down through France, through Versailles, which she wasn't impressed by.
Why not?
But she was taken to see Le Petit Trianon.
Yeah.
And she said she thought it was a very paltry thing for a queen. And wasn't impressed by the opera, though she saw some very good dancing. But anyway, she made her way all the way down through Italy, Milan.
She crossed the Alps.
She crossed the Alps. She saw the Last Supper in Milan.
She did.
Went to Venice. She heard Allegri's Miserere in Rome, and went to a lot of performances of music wherever she could. In one day, she also loved architecture, I should say. In one day, she saw 14 churches in Rome.
Oh,
so she was completely insatiable, culture person.
Did she go to Fenice?
She went to La Fenice and all the other theatres. There were several opera theatres in Venice at the time. She saw several performances, and she wasn't that impressed, in fact.
So she had very high standards.
She had very high standards because she went to the theatre in London when she was there for the season more or less every night and heard some really wonderful artists. And she'd started hearing wonderful people here in Scotland, in Edinburgh as well. So an incredible stream of particularly sopranos came through Edinburgh. Mrs. Billington, who was this extraordinary lady who is, in fact, her parents were German, Weichsel, they were called. Mrs. Billington was a large lady but had a magnificent voice. And she came to Edinburgh, sang a lot here.
Of course, Elizabeth Montagu Buccleuch was a one-off. I mean, Richard, the present Duke, did say to me, of course, you must understand that there was one extraordinary family, and it was all about Elizabeth being married to Henry, the third Duke.
Yes.
And they chose to live here, not in London. Good God, what a decision that was.
Yes, a lot of people were surprised at that. But I thank God that they did, or that she did rather, because her patronage allowed a huge amount of creativity, not just musical, but in all the arts.
And here you see opera in Edinburgh. Of course, can you believe opera actually existed in Edinburgh? It's called Theatre Royal, Edinburgh. Thomas Shepard defining it as part of the modern Athens, displayed in a series of views of Edinburgh at that time. I love the carriage arriving. It's a sweet little building. And here you've got a Theatre Royal under the patronage of the Duchess of Buccleuch. No song, no supper. A farce called No Song, No Supper. Anyway, she was involved in all sorts of aspects of the arts.
Theatre wasn't allowed in Edinburgh until the 1760s, mid to late 1760s.
It was simply not allowed.
It was not allowed. The church frowned upon it, and it wasn't given a license. So there was no, it wasn't even a play until a license was given to the Theatre Royal, and plays could be performed, and operas could come to the theatre. They were mostly English operas, because that was the language that everybody could understand. But when people started hearing excerpts from Italian opera at St. Cecilia's Hall, they wanted to hear more, of course. And so Italian opera gradually found its way in a limited way into the Theatre Royal. You would have loved being here in Dalkeith at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries, because all the Italians came through. One of the most famous, of course, was Angelica Catalani. She was the Maria Callas of her day. And she's, yes, absolutely. And she appeared first at St. Cecilia's Hall and created a sensation, and came back many, many times. And of course, the Buccleuch family were on the front row at every single concert and invited her here. To explain this, I need to go right back to Rome in 1740s and the birth of Domenico Corri, who, as a young boy, went to Naples to study with Porpora, the great composer and teacher, who had also taught Haydn at one point.
Taught Haydn?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
And Corri became a very expert singing master. He wasn't good enough to sing himself, but he became a wonderful singing pedagogue and a composer and general all-round musician. And he came in 1770 via London to Edinburgh. He was invited to take charge of the Edinburgh Music Society at St. Cecilia's Hall, which is just near Cowgate. And for a number of years, he developed that into a highly successful concert club. They had weekly concerts and lots of things in between. And everybody who came to Edinburgh performed there. The Edinburgh Music Society was small, and by the end of the century, tastes were beginning to change. People wanted more orchestral music, more opera or operatic music, and he started his own concert series there, and it was called Corey's Rooms.
Oh my gosh!
And in fact, he was a musician. He wasn't a businessman, so. It got into trouble. It didn't last all that long. He got into debt. He started a publishing company, which was quite successful. But Corey's Rooms as a concert venue couldn't last because the business model wasn't really reliable. And he, of course, somebody in his position, relied hugely on patronage.
Yes.
By the Buccleuch family, for example. And so he dedicated several works to the Duchess of Buccleuch, knowing that she was passionate about music. And because he trained with Porpora in that great Italian tradition, early 18th century tradition of bel canto.
Yeah, bel canto.
He brought this to Edinburgh and published the most important singing manual of the 19th century, in fact, and dedicated it to Elizabeth Buccleuch. Richard, can I show you? I think this is one of my most favourite volumes of the whole collection.
Yeah.
And it's by Montague Corey, who is Domenico Corey's son. Domenico, who came over from Rome and Naples. So he travelled around the Highlands and Islands looking for music to record and write down. And he says, I obtained this air by hearing it repeated by a female voice in the neighbourhood of Cromarty. Shortly after, I perceived the singer, a girl, who was bringing in a net from a boat. I hastily descended the cliff in order to overtake her, under the hope of obtaining some other melody from her voice, or at least getting her to repeat the above. But before I could reach the seashore, she had disappeared, and as the evening was first closing in, I did not prosecute my search. From some of the people in the neighbourhood who have some knowledge of this air, I learnt the above now and the name of it. And this is it, and he's arranged it for piano. So this was recorded, as it were, on the hoof, in the depths of the countryside. This is the true Scottish folklore. This is another wonderful ancient melody, Vich Avor. And Corey says, I had much trouble in obtaining this melody, as I took it down from an old man strumming on a bad half-strung harp. On travelling further, I found some person who had a recollection of the melody and said it were correct. The name of it is Vich Avor. Mr. Fraser favoured me with words to suit the measure. Yeah, this is completely unique. I mean, this is just
Oh my God.
absolutely magical. Look, Her Grace the Duchess of Buccleuch's Christmas in Scotland, composed and arranged for the pianoforte and most humbly dedicated to His Grace the Duke, by His Grace's most obedient and humble servant Andrew Peary. Elizabeth was obviously a very serious person, but she had a very impish streak, I think, because she collected all these wonderful caricatures of politicians, all kinds of people, but particularly of musicians, and pasted them into a wonderful set of albums. And this one is of an Italian family. They're impoverished. There's a singer at the center. There's a double bass player. There's somebody playing the piano. There's a child in the corner playing the violin. And underneath the piano is a dish of macaroni. Behind the double bass player, there's an opera poster for La Buona Figliuola. She's doing, the woman here is probably a singer too. She's changing a baby's nappy. And interestingly, on the wall, just near the window, there's a portrait of the famous dancer Vestris. Oh. So this is a caricature of a family, but there's a lot of social detail in there, which is really fascinating.
It's ragged.
Yeah.
Their legs.
Yes, they're poor, they're struggling. Perhaps this is the Corey family. Who knows who they are? But it's an Italian family, and she loved these caricatures. This is La Signora Catalani, the famous Italian opera singer, the Callas of her day. And she's portrayed as a cat, as her name, he calls her Catalini. And she's singing an aria to John Bull, who's playing the violin. John Bull representing Englishness, really, which I think is quite cruel. She was really one of the great operatic heroines of the beginning of the 19th century. And here is another very wicked caricature by Gilray of an aristocratic family making music at home. There's a double bass, there's a flute, the lady playing the piano, lady playing the horn, somebody playing the violin, somebody playing the trumpet. And Elizabeth Buccleuch has written in the names of the people who are being caricatured. So this is Lord Cholmondeley, this is Lady Buckinghamshire, and the Marquess of Salisbury playing the horn.
Who is this extraordinary human being?
Well, this is a wonderful character, one of the great characters of the 18th century, Ignatius Sancho, and he's portrayed here by Gainsborough because he was working for Elizabeth Buccleuch's parents as a butler, and they were all together in Bath, and Gainsborough painted him at the same time that he painted Elizabeth and her husband. Now, Sancho had been born a slave and sold as a child in London. Elizabeth's grandfather, the second Duke of Montague, got to know about him and took him out of slavery, educated him, and gave him a place in their household as a butler. He also gave him music lessons. He became a composer.
Oh my God.
And he was a prolific letter writer. He'd obviously been very well educated in the hands of the Duke. And he was the first African in this country to have his letters published. They were so good, so witty and so fascinating. He conversed with people like Garrick and Lawrence Sterne, all kinds of people.
Oh my God.
He was the first African to have his music published. And he came up to Dalkeith every summer for several years as a member of the household, as a butler. But more than that, he was really, I think the family really loved him. He was obviously a charming man, great sense of humour. You can judge that by the letters that he wrote. And Elizabeth, I think, really took to him and commissioned him to write music for the family. And he wrote 4 volumes of dances.
Good God.
And dedicated some of them to specific members of the family. So I think he was really quite a skillful musician because these reels composed here at Dalkeith have a real Scottish flavour to them. So he was, quite an expert, if low-key musician. And I'd love to read you just an extract from one of his letters.
Yes, could you read that?
Written here in Dalkeith to his friend back in London. He said, we had herrings in perfection and would have had mackerel, but the scoundrels were too sharp for us and would not be caught. I can afford you no more time, for I have 3 more letters to write, besides this scrawl. Lady Mhairi, that is Elizabeth's daughter, grows a little angel. The Duchess Elizabeth, gets pretty round. They all eat, drink, and seem pure merry. So it just gives you a flavour of the wit and charm of his letters, which are published, and you can get them published by Penguin now. So here you get a wonderful sense of the family, and it's very important that they're grouped around a harp. So it shows you just how important music was to them. It's at the centre of the picture, and their daughter, Lady Elizabeth Scott, is obviously, she's been having harp lessons. The harp was the most fashionable instrument of the day, and the harp would have been made by Erard. You can see that in the background is the wonderful Robert Adam Bridge, and the two young men of the family very much involved with the Napoleonic War, which was preoccupying Europe and terrifying everybody at the time. But I think it's a wonderfully intimate and evocative family portrait. The parents looking on with great admiration at their daughter, who's playing so beautifully on the harp, the dogs at their feet. It gives you a sense of the warmth and love of particularly of music in the family.
What about the one who is drawing, painting, drawing?
Yes, I don't know, that's Lady Caroline. I don't know what she's drawing, but she probably, that was her inclination. She probably had drawing lessons. They all they were all wonderfully educated, particularly in music. And the three daughters had Italian lessons every week because they had singing lessons. They were taught by Domenico Cori.
Oh my God.
And not only did they have to perfect their technique of bel canto singing, they had to have the perfect Italian accent. And so they had at least 2 or 3 Italian lessons a week.
Oh my God. Now, the whole lot of them there, but how would that painting have come into being? Obviously, you can't have asked them there to sit for any length of time as they are depicted.
Oh, well, I think he would have made a series of sketches,
yes,
wouldn't he? And this is Don Loup, another exile from France, who'd fled Napoleon. And many French artists and aristocrats, of course, came to Scotland and were supported and hosted by the Buccleuch family. And Don Loup was one of them. And this was a way of showing their support by commissioning paintings.
Did he do any other paintings for the family?
Not for the family.
No.
But he was quite a prolific portrait artist, working in Edinburgh while he was here.
Can we possibly look at the juxtaposition of these two images of Elizabeth in old age and in youth? I think this portrait of her in old age is a really commanding image. And it's a Lawrence. It's a masterpiece. Now, what is she wearing? She's wearing a brooch.
It's a silver tassel holding together, perhaps, that silk scarf. It's quite an informal portrait, and it was considered quite shocking, apparently, in its day. Because,
why?
Because her hair was a bit untidy, and she wasn't, being portrayed as the great Duchess, with jewels and
she must have chosen.
Probably, yes.
That.
Yeah. But if you look very carefully at her face, her eyes, there's so much knowledge in her eyes and wisdom, and there's the beginnings of a smile on her face.
Yes, I love it.
If you look at the Gainsborough portrait, her hair is quite grey. Same eyes.
Yes.
Same eyes, and that same beginnings of a smile.
But she's been hidden. Nobody has actually bothered to come here as the home of this remarkable creature. Well,
she's only really been explored recently. The music collection was the key. The music collection at Boughton was the key to opening up the door onto her life. And she was known about, but I think studying and researching the music in the collection has really thrown a great deal of light onto Duchess Elizabeth.
Thank you.